Hi, welcome to this video lecture. Today we're going to start with establishing an application programming interface, or an API, between Python and Collimator. So specifically we're going to be running Python code in Jupyter Notebook to push data and pull data from our Collimator model. And you can actually run your simulations from Python. That's going to be running your simulation on the Collimator server and then collecting that information back into Collimator. So today we're going to be talking about just establishing the connection and verifying that the connection is working. So I'm going to start here by going into Collimator. So I just pull up this Collimator model. I'm working from if you're following along with class, this is from our assignment 2. So we've got our model all set up with some set points. So we're doing level control here, where we give this a level set point or a height set point here through this constant block. We're also doing control of component B. So this QB, this is a flow set point of 4.5, and then finally we're doing a heat set point. So here we can enter in the amount of heat in gigajoules per minute into our into our chemical plant. All right, so we've got all these set up just as constants, and you notice they all have a default value in there. So here we have 8 is the value for the height or the level set point. For the heat we have 6, and then for the flow of B we have 4.5. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, these are all set points to controllers. So these are all part of our distributed control system that is regulating all those by pushing that information down into the PID controllers to regulate those. So eventually we're going to be wanting to vary these from an external program. So these 3 set points, we want to be able to write to these set points from an external program, and specifically Python. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here somewhere in the blank space of my model. So when I do that, that pulls up these model parameters, or this model definition pane on the right-hand side. So I can go in here and I can assign some model level parameters that we can push data to and pull data from. So I'm going to give these the same names. Actually, I'm going to do H set point. So what I'm doing is I'm telling Collimator that this parameter you could push data from an external source into this parameter. Then that's going to populate it wherever I need HSP throughout my model. It'll populate it here. So I want to give it a default value here of 8. Here I also want to do my QB set point, and I'll just give it a default value of 4.5. So this default value is basically if you are not specifically pushing data to this parameter, it's going to resort to the default value. And so I've got my QB set point there. Now I'm going to do my heat set point, QSP here. And I'll just give this a default value of 6. Okay, so now I've defined these model level parameters, which we can use through our API later. So now here, I'm going to go to my height set point. So here, instead of this value of 8, I'm not going to give it a number here. I'm going to tell it, I want you to pull this from my model level parameter of height set point. So I know we're using the same names repeatedly through here, but if I give this a variable name instead of a numerical value, as long as I've defined that variable name as a model parameter, it's going to pull it from there rather than expecting a numerical entry there. Okay, so I'm going to scroll over to my QB set point here. I'm going to do the same here. Instead of this 4.5, I'm going to use the same variable. Make sure you keep the case consistent. So now this is going to get QBSP. It's going to pull it from that parameter. And then finally, I'm going to go down to my, I'm not very good at navigating this still. Okay, my heat set point, and instead of this numerical value, I'm going to give it a QSP. Okay, so we've defined these model parameters. These are the variables that we're going to be able to push data into through our Collimator API. All right, so another thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to all my models here. So I've got a bunch of junk in here. I'm specifically working with module 4 right now. so from here, when I'm looking at all my different modules, let's see. So when I'm looking at all my different modules here, I can go up to here, and this is where I generate what's called an API key. So I've got one created already. I'm going to generate a new API key. So this gives me this long string of letters and numbers. I am going to copy this, and I'm going to just save this in a text file. You could just save this in a Word document or whatever. I'm just going to save this somewhere for now, just momentarily. So I'm just saving this off screen here. So I've generated an API key, I've saved it. Another thing that I'm going to need is what's called the UUID. And that can be found, this is the UUID for your model, that can be found up here. If you just go to the URL, just copy everything after this / following projects. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to save that somewhere else as well, just in the same text file. Okay, so we've done everything within the Collimator model to be able to establish connectivity. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch a Jupyter Notebook. So I got my Jupyter Notebook here. I'm just going to call this API Collimator or something like that. If you're working on an assignment, you can just give this your assignment name. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, we've already installed the PyCollimator tool, but each time I use it, I'm going to need to import it. So here I'm going to go import PyCollimator as Collimator. So that just tells my Python that I'm going to be using this package. All right, so I'm going to define a token, and this token is going to be a string of text. This is the API key. So I'm going to go back to where I had saved this before and type in my API key here. Our project also needs a UUID. So I'm just going to call this project UUID, give that quotation marks, and now I'm going to go grab that UUID. This is the one that we copied from the URL, from the URL in the browser. Okay, so now I need to establish this API, this application programming interface. So this is, think of both of these as kind of like a password. So we're going to be writing information from our Jupyter Notebook down to our Collimator model, but for security reasons, we want to make sure that our Python notebook has permission to be able to read and write things from our Collimator model. So that's essentially what we're doing here. So this command is going to be just entering this information. So this command is collimator.set auth token, and here we just, since we've already saved these as variable names, we can just enter those in here. All right, so now I just run. That should be able to establish this connectivity. So first importing Collimator, and we set this up by using that command. Okay, so now I'm just totally in a Jupyter Notebook. By running those commands above, I should have established this connectivity. But now you can verify it by using this other command, collimator.list_models, and this needs parentheses. So this should go into Collimator, and it should pull out all the models that I've created. Remember, I was working from a module called Module 4. I got a bunch of other junk in there from other things I've been working on, but you notice our model name does show up. So that's great. So we are successfully have established a connection between our Jupyter Notebook and Collimator. So that's actually kind of cool. All right, so I am going to now create a new object within my Jupyter Notebook, and I am going to, this is my, basically telling this is the model name for my Jupyter Notebook, and I'll just call this Module 4 with no space in it, and I'm going to use this other command, collimator.load model, and here, notice we have all these different models up here to choose from. That module that the model I was working in was called Module 4. So I'm going to just tell Collimator, hey, load up this model. This, of all the different models that I've been working with in Collimator, this is the one that I want to be establishing an API with. So from here, now we've got this model defined in our Jupyter Notebook, and now you can do things like pull in the value of our parameters. So remember, in our Collimator model, I went and defined those parameters, HSP, QBSP, and QSP. So this is going to tell me, can I actually pull the value of these parameters successfully? So you should see, yeah, that's great. So we get our QBSP of 4.5, our HSP of 8, and our QSP of 6. That's great. So this is just pulling the default values. So another thing that we can do now is we can actually push new values into our Collimator model. So that's another command. Instead of just parameters, we can now do set underscore parameters. And I'm going to do this first with a regular parenthesis, then a curly bracket, and now I need to use those exact names. So QBSP, I give this a colon, and I tell this, well, let's say I don't want a QBSP of 4.5. Let's say I want a QBSP of 6. Let's see how this will work. Then for my next, oh, and I did this wrong. I need to do QBSP there in quotes, and then the 6 is not in quotes. So I do a comma here. Let's do our height set point here, and let's change the height set point to 7.5. Finally, we've got our QSP. Then outside of the quotes, I can give this a Q set point of 10, for example. Okay, so this should be now, we're defining new values for all of those parameters. So this will let us push these values in. Once we push these values in, we could run a simulation and get these values back. So let's just run it. Oh, and I spelled this wrong. Common mistake, so let's run that again. Okay, it seems to have run successfully. We can verify this by now we've changed the values of those parameters. So let's ping our model again and see if it returns back those values. So it did. We successfully changed the values of those parameters using this set parameters code. So the final command we're going to use here is our sim equals Collimator.run simulation, and we want to tell it which simulation we want to run. We've called ours module 4, and we can go ahead and hit run. So I want to keep this video short. So I believe this did successfully run our model, which means we should be able to pull in those results and look at them and verify that everything worked correctly. I'm going to save that though for the next video lecture, so you can just click at the link below or click at the link in the end screen of this video, and we'll dive into how to pull these results and how to plot them.